Episode of China Unmasked from the Epoch Times. We're going to be talking today about the coronavirus, and we have with us here Dr. Dana Cheng. She's the senior editor of China News at the Epoch Times. Dana, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
And of course, we're going to talk about, well, first of all, the situation in China that a lot of us may not be hearing much about when it comes to this virus, how it was able to spread as much as it did, and how damaging it is for a regime to control information, because that's one of the big pieces of this it's being discussed a little bit, but I think we're going to go a little more in depth with that. And so, Dana, let's first talk about how things changed in China. We'll start with this, and we'll move into kind of the situation in Wuhan quickly. But I wanted to start with, there were reports before the Chinese regime started really taking action to stop the spread of this virus, reports in early December, but the people who were spreading them were suppressed. Could you tell us what happened?
The first case that we heard was on December 8th. It was believed to be the first case for a while. When that happened, people in China, in Wuhan, they start to post information on social media. And in China, everything is controlled. Information is very tightly controlled. All the media are state-owned, and every media have to follow the directive from the central government, and all the social media are controlled. This might be hard to understand for American, but artificial intelligence can remove your posts on social media according to certain keywords, and there are internet police that can shut down your accounts if they don't like what you write. So what you write on the social media or text message with your friends and family members have to follow the directive of central government too, and people living in that environment for a long time understand what they can say, what they cannot say. But this kind of information about a virus is so critical to the public. So some people start to post the information. On January 1st, police arrested 8 people that posted information, and one of the 8 people was a doctor. They were talking about all this SARS-like virus going on, and people should get
And SARS was a very similar virus that spread in early 2000s in China, and had similar issues with suppression by the CCP, which allowed it, the Chinese Communist Party, which allowed it to become worse than it probably would have been otherwise. But go ahead, I'm sorry.
Actually, in December, the information had been widely circulated among medical experts.
And so we can assume if by then it was already spreading and circulating, then it must have emerged even earlier than that, we can assume.
Right, okay, I'll get into that later. So in December, doctors and nurses are starting to protect themselves and wear suits. And so they know there's something going on, it's a SARS-like virus, but they don't have the authority to inform the public. And the local government, usually, they try to report good news, not the bad news. But in this situation, as we heard from an interview with the mayor of Wuhan, it sounds like the local government reported to the higher government, to the central government. And again, local government do not have the authority to publicize the information, and they have to wait. And then each layer it goes up, it's a delay. And for each layer of the government, they have to consider whether it make them look bad. They have to consider what time it is, how many people die, or just a few. Okay, this month we're going to have a trade talk with U.S. We're going to have a Taiwan election, and we're preparing for the Chinese New Year. We can't have bad news like that. So each consideration delayed the information, and that delay of information is very costly. It's very costly. Then we start to hear there are different cases reported outside China. So inside China, when more and more people start to catch that, people start to know there's something going on in Wuhan. It seems like a mysterious disease going on in Wuhan. At the same time, and we heard in Taiwan, Thailand, Japan, and US, there were reports of this virus, Wuhan virus. People start to joke, hey, this is a Patriot virus. You only export to the foreign countries, not other cities inside China, because we never heard any case outside Wuhan. So only because there are reports outside China, that kind of international pressure that pressured central government to reconsider their decision. Then they start to send experts to Wuhan and start to inform the public. By that time, it's already January 20th. I'll tell one story. For example, in Beijing, there's like a parents' meeting. A school had a parents' gathering, parents' meeting. One person that had a symptom but was not educated about this disease joined the gathering. That's 680 people. On that day, when he heard that there's a Wuhan virus going on, he immediately went to the hospital. He was confirmed that he got the virus. If he was informed earlier, there will not be a big gathering like that. He would not have gone to that gathering, and the potential of transmission is big. So for a long time, the first case, like December 8th until January 20th, the government voice is no human-to-human transmission. It's only from that seafood market, no human-to-human transmission. And sometimes say very limited human-to-human transmission. But actually there are cases that the whole family have caught the virus, and it's obvious human-to-human transmission.
Interesting. And so had the CCP told people that there's risk of human-to-human transmission, and had they warned people at least to be cautious, maybe it wouldn't have spread so quickly. Because, as you mentioned, there was that large, more than 600 people parent meeting where one person went and did have the virus. There was also this huge 40,000 family potluck they had in Wuhan, more than 100,000 people sharing dishes. I assume that wouldn't have happened either had the government told people.
That's 5 days before Wuhan was locked down. People were totally like in the mood of celebrating New Year. And there was a potluck party, 40,000 people, 40,000 families joined. That involved 130,000 people. Imagine that's many days after the virus has been spreading in Wuhan.
And I think there's an important piece of context when it comes to us understanding why this information was suppressed by the Chinese Communist Party. Of course, there's a lot of historical examples of this, of them doing this as well. For example, the Great Leap Forward, when they were talking about grain supplies and local governments were lying about the amount of supplies because they didn't want to look bad, and you had whole villages starving to death. You know, this is something the CCP has been doing for decades. It's from the get-go. But they do it under the name of social stability. Will you tell us and in the Chinese Communist Party's language, what social stability means, because we have a different definition of it in the U.S.
Yeah, and that's a big word. Everyone is very conscious of social stability. Basically, Communist Party is a foreign thing to Chinese people. It is from Soviet Union. It's not elected by people, and it always suppress people. So a Communist Party feel very insecure. So whenever there's a bad news, they fear that people would rise and overthrow them. They fear people would protest and get out of control. So they fear losing its power. So social stability is the first priority for them. Each year, the Communist Party allocate more budget for social stability than military budget. So basically suppressing people. You know, you have camera everywhere. They even have a social credibility.
Social credit system.
A
Yeah.
social credit system. If people say certain things they don't like, they give you bad credit. If you have bad credit, you won't be able to take a flight. You won't be able to take a speed train. In the worst case, you won't be able to find a job.
And to mention plainclothes police, extrajudicial branches of the party, such as the 610 office to suppress Falun Gong, re-education camps, you name it. There are huge systems for this. And even the PLA itself, the People's Liberation Army, is not like the American Army. The American military, if you join, they make you, state a pledge, your oath, that you will defend the Constitution. It's about defending the people and what the people of the country and what the country's values are. Under the Chinese Communist Party, the PLA, they're sworn to protect the party. Imagine just as a hypothetical thing, if the American military was sworn to protect, like, the Democrat Party, the Republican Party, rather than the country itself. That's basically what the PLA is for the Communist Party. And I think it's important to know this in context, because people doing things that risk what they call social stability, or risk the Chinese Communist Party losing face, as they like to say, is a serious crime under the laws of the CCP, right? And I think this virus ties into that, and just as SARS did. Now let's talk about the situation in Wuhan right now. Of course, we know that Wuhan is locked down. For Americans, we think China. We know China, but we talk about Chinese provinces. Not a lot. We don't know. Let's just be honest with ourselves. Maybe some of us know. What is the significance of Wuhan in China? Where is it at, and what's the significance?
Wuhan is in the center of China, geographically. It's like Chicago in United States. It's a big industrial city. For a long time, it's the only city that the train can connect northern China and southern China. It's a beautiful city. I grew up in Wuhan. I haven't been back for years. There's a Yangtze River goes right through it. And there's a bridge on top of the river, and that bridge, the train have to go through this bridge to go to the southern part of China.
So Wuhan is like the transportation hub of China.
Yeah. So it connects 9 provinces around it. So it's the most convenient spot for conferences. And there are a lot of international supply chain companies there.
So in other words, on a business level and on a government level, what starts in Wuhan spreads across China. And that's pretty dang significant when we're talking about a virus. Yeah.
So there are people from different cities and different provinces travel to Wuhan to have conferences, and they also go to Wuhan to work. So during the Chinese New Year time, these people go back to their hometown to celebrate Chinese New Year. Chinese New Year is so big. It's like Thanksgiving and Christmas roll into one.
It's something around 3 billion people every year travel for Chinese New Year.
During the Chinese New Year time, there are 3 billion trips in China. And for Wuhan, it's 30 million trips. 30 million. So 5 million people already left Wuhan before it's locked down. They go back to their hometown, you know. So the transportation made it very convenient, and thus made it very convenient for the virus too. So that's why this kind of a virus happen in China, in Wuhan, it has a huge impact nationwide. In fact, right now, every province, every city have people infected, including Tibet.
Yeah, and so what is the situation now in Hubei province, which is where Wuhan is?
Right.
Because of course we know that Wuhan is shut down, but there's also pretty strict security measures across all of Hubei.
All the cities in Hubei are locked down because the people traveling to and outside Wuhan, a lot of them are from different cities in Hubei province. So Wuhan is the capital of Hubei province. And a few days after Wuhan was locked down, the whole Hubei was locked down, Hubei province.
Now, what do we know of the situation on the ground? I know at Epoch Times we actually had reporters call into China and talk to even some doctors at these hospitals. And some of the reports were pretty shocking, at least what we were told by people on the ground. Take it for what it is. They were saying, for example, that they can't dispose of the bodies in some places because the people in charge of it don't want to pick up the bodies because they're afraid of getting sick. Of course, because these are people who died of that illness. They don't want to transport these bodies. There's cases of doctors, for example, not getting the disposable suits that protect them from the illness, and so they're reusing these suits. And when you're treating people who are sick and who are have a disease that could be transmitted, and you're reusing the suit, then the suit itself becomes something that can pass that infection because you're dealing with bodily fluids and those kinds of things that get on the suit. And what have we heard of the situation on the ground? Is it dire, or is the CCP helping these people, or what's going on? What do we know?
It's obvious that those hospitals are short of, their material that they need, and especially they haven't got enough testing kits to confirm the virus. So in reality, when they don't have testing kits, there are hospitals in other cities in Hubei. They don't have testing kits. That means they cannot confirm any case. A lot of people die before it's even confirmed, right? So the reported confirmed cases and reported deaths are greatly underestimated.
Do you think that's because they can't count them, or is it because, in other words, they don't have the capability to test it, or do you think they're intentionally suppressing it, or a combination of both?
Right. I would say when they are not supplied with the testing kit, that limit their ability to confirm the case. And why they are not getting enough testing kits, we don't know. Maybe it's purposeful. Maybe it's just inefficient system. But those who are familiar with China's situation say that's also a way to enforce social stability because you want to suppress the number.
And of course, that's based on, following what has happened in China over the course of the entire CCP's reign, that this is a pattern, this is how they operate. We can assume that this is a continuation of that pattern. We we don't know what they're thinking, so we can't say for sure, but this is a continuation of a pattern.
The doctors and nurses have to sign confidential agreement. They're not allowed to talk to any media, not allowed to talk to any family members and friends. So some of them are very much under pressure and very depressed, very depressed. If they talk about it with friends on their social media, then they can get a warning, they can lose their job. But last week, we have heard like nurses recorded a video and tried to tell the public. That's taking a great risk.
And they made some pretty serious claims. They're talking. I mean, it's a social media post of an alleged nurse and others coming forward and claiming that, for example, there's like 90,000 people infected in Wuhan, which
Yes.
is way over what the CCP is reporting.
We have heard several channels from the doctors and nurses and saying there are about 90,000 or 100,000 people infected. The government official will not admit that. They say a very low number. But on Monday, the deputy governor had a press conference, and he said the province is preparing 100,000 beds in hospital. Indirectly, he confirmed that number.
And there's a couple points with that too. One is because of the situation, one with, I'd say, lack of supplies on the ground, lack of disposable suits, lack of testing kits, lack of local, problems currently existing with local logistics, which we're still looking into. The hospitals themselves are basically transmission centers. If you're going to get sick, the hospital's the place to go and get it, because you're in close proximity with a large number of people with what is very likely a highly contagious disease, and standards for cleanliness are not being upheld because they don't have the supplies for it, from what we've seen.
Yeah, in hospitals, a lot of people are sent home by doctors because there are not enough beds. So they can't take them into the hospital, basically send them home. So what does it mean? You send them back to their families. The family member have to take care of them. So that's another way that's very dangerous for other people.
Well, and on this hospital too, from what I understand, they're constructing it right next to one of the city's main water supplies. And there are current reports saying that transmission of this disease is through bodily fluids, even to the extent that it's even on like the liquid on your eyes. And so bodily fluid in general, water supply, who knows if it's going to be, I don't know how it's going to. It's a risk, presumably we can assume, but we'll have to see how much so, because information on the disease is so thin right now, right? Yeah, so let's talk about, real quick before we jump into the situation, I'd say, throughout China. What is the situation in the other provinces of China? In terms of what the CCP, locking down cities and travel restrictions and things?
All the interstate travel have been banned. So it's like a semi-lockdown. All the entertainment place, cinemas, Disney, and the Great Wall, like those tourist sites, Forbidden City, the major parts that people go for gathering or restaurants, they're closed. And people basically stay home. If you see photos of the street, usually it's very, very crowded. And now it's totally empty. But Wuhan, those who from Wuhan or left Wuhan, they suffer a lot. 5 million people left Wuhan before the lockdown. They go back to their hometown, maybe Sichuan, maybe Shanghai, maybe Beijing, different part of the country. And so every city, every street, every community, they try to track down who have been traveled to Wuhan and just come back to their community. And they try to seal their door. Say you stay there for 2 weeks. Some even use like metal or wood stick and totally block their door.
Interesting. And so these people are being treated like lepers and locked in their homes. Can we assume they're getting food supplies and these things? I mean, I guess it's just speculation, but
yeah,
it
we
seems
don't
pretty
know
serious.
the detail. We just see the video, like how they are locked in the, and they cannot, of course, they cannot stay in any hotel. Whether the person is infected or not, he cannot stay in any hotel. They cannot go back to China, and in some cases,
You
if
cannot
you
go
have
back
a
to
Hubei,
Wuhan, right?
yeah. Oh, you cannot go back to Wuhan, and if you have a Hubei license, people start to chase you and make sure police take that person. And if you have an ID from Wuhan or Hubei, you can get your car fuel gas.
Now, if there's this level of concern across China, what would you say that the general state of the public is right now? Are people panicked? Are they losing faith in the CCP? Are they trusting the CCP still? What's the general situation?
It's very hard for people outside to understand. Chinese people live in a very total different world because their whole environment is cut off from the rest of the world. The internet is totally blocked. So they are only given the information from the government-controlled media or social media. And that environment, people totally trust the government, even today.
And I know that in some of the dissident community, they're saying the opposite, though. People are interpreting it within their own worldviews. The people who believe in the CCP still believe in the CCP. The ones who don't are pointing out that the way the Chinese Communist Party is handling this suggests that all of its social monitoring programs don't function as they claim they do. Because, they monitor everything you do. They have cameras everywhere. They have AI systems that track things. They have police that track things. They watch every person presumably has databases on them. And I mean, you name it. Anything that they can track, anything that they can monitor, any way that they can, follow people, they do it. And even with all of that, they can't seem to trace who left Wuhan and where they're at. Is this accurate?
Yeah.
And of course, the Chinese Communist Party is even like going door to door. They're sending people door to door, checking their temperatures and these types of things.
Yeah.
And asking, are you holding people from Wuhan? Right?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to the Chinese Communist Party's response outside of Hubei and outside of Wuhan, or even internally, how effective is it in containing the virus? Do we know?
That we don't know because the virus can, a person can carry the virus for 14 days before any symptom happened. So even someone does not have fever, does not have any symptom, he can still transmit to other people.
And we should be clear too that while this has been spreading for some time, the lockdown, I'd say the real response from the CCP is only about around a week right now old. And so 2 weeks time where there's no symptoms, but you can still transmit it. We're still in that window. So, yeah.
So international medical doctors have estimation. The lockdown of Wuhan can maybe control 24.9, maybe 25% of spreading. But it missed the golden time.
Yeah, and this is serious too. There are external studies in the West. One was Harvard and one was through another university. Initial estimates outside of China put the spread rate at about 3.8. They walked the number back to the general number now estimate is around 2.5. Mm-hmm. And so in other words, every single person who catches it will spread it to 2.5 people. And I don't know if anyone out there ever played that game when you were a kid where you take a grain of rice and double it every day, and then within 2 months you're dealing with numbers that you couldn't even imagine because they're so high. This is a disease spreading at that rate.
Well, as we heard yesterday, U.S. offered to help 3 times, and China hasn't accepted yet. So if China would be more open, international community would help, it might be a different situation. It's estimated that by the time February 4th, the number of infected people might reach 250,000.
And I understand the Chinese Communist Party is also not really sharing data with the CDC, Center for Disease Control.
Yes, we have seen the report from medical magazine, Luzon, that the actual, it's written by like a Chinese doctor and a Western doctor. The first case they know is from December 1st. Actually, it was not from that seafood market. But for a long time in China, the government voice was, okay, it's only from that seafood market. There's no human-to-human transmission. But that seafood market continued to operate for 22 days after the first so-called case, like December 8th.
And the seafood market narrative is a useful alibi for the Chinese Communist Party. Now, look, we don't know where the virus started.
Yes.
We should be clear on this. There are rumors. The first case suggests, the one in December 1st, suggests that the seafood market narrative is not accurate. We do know, for example, that there is a level 4 virus or disease research lab in Wuhan, about 20 miles from that market, which has led a lot of people to, there's a lot of information out there that does suggest it escaped from this lab, basically. We don't know if that's the case. We can't verify it. But what is important to note is that in China, under the Chinese Communist Party, information any information is either suppressed or allowed to spread. People talking about the virus were arrested. People posting about the seafood market were allowed to spread it. And so why was that? And also keep in mind that when you're dealing with in other words, what is allowed to spread is being allowed to spread is maybe a nice way to put it.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. It's either an official way of propaganda or unofficial way of central government's message. Even today, if someone say, okay, 4 people died in our community, he can be arrested. And police tell him, only 1. Then 2 days later, oops, yes, 4. The nurse, I just saw a notice, like an internal notice, a nurse, talked about the situation in the hospital to her family member, and then she got a warning.
And we should also make it clear, too, that the narrative of the seafood market is valuable for the CCP as well, because you can't investigate it. They shut it down already. And so when they send foreign inspectors to China, which they presumably are going to look into where it came from and how it spread, they're not going to look further than that seafood market if that's a narrative being used. That's what the CCP is telling them where it came from. And when they go there, they're going to find an abandoned market, a shutdown market. They cannot investigate it. There's nothing left to investigate. And so it ends there. This is useful. If the CCP did have any responsibility in this, which we're speculating at this point because we don't know, regardless, that's the investigations end there unless there's external investigations into its origins. Now, Dana, what would you say is the direction this is heading, first of all, within China? What is the significance for China right now at this time with a disease like this spreading, because this does happen right after the Taiwan elections. This happens right when Hong Kong is reaching its boiling point. This happens when the U.S. trade deal is kind of looking like, the U.S.-China trade deal is looking like it's going to, or say trade war is coming to an end, kind of, we'll have to see. What is the significance of this taking place right now for the CCP?
It will have a big impact on economy. It will damage the so-called authority or image of the communist. People start to question, and more people will question them. Of course, there are people who can see through their lies. You know, those who can see through can always see through, but there are also other people who grew up in their lives, in the propaganda, and have tuned their mind to it for a long time, and have never been exposed to a different environment. They continue to believe. So it will be, in terms of the, people, there are more and more people will know that they live in a very different place than the rest of the world.
Great. I think this is a good place to end the first episode of China Unmasked. We're going to be doing this 5 days a week, or trying to. And again, this is Dr. Dana Cheng, senior editor with the Epoch Times, focused on China news. I'm Joshua Phillip, senior investigative reporter with Epoch Times. Tune in tomorrow again, and Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. we're going to shoot for. And we're going to be looking heavily into this virus, really trying to dig out the real information on it, and also looking at other investigative stories and, say, in-depth analysis on China and how the Chinese Communist Party affects the West. So please subscribe, like this video, hit the notification bell. We need your support. Tell your friends about it and help us grow. And with that said, we'll see you next time.